Welcome, Nita. Hello.
Hello. Hi, Nadine. Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here with everyone today.
Well, thank you for having accepted our invitation. It's a pleasure to talk to you about your wonderful book, which I was saying in Romanian just now is the #1 bestseller. And that is quite a feat. And it's selling very much, and it's also being read a lot. And therefore, for those of your Romanian readers who haven't read all throughout it, I wish they can finish it very, very soon so that we can start debates online about your book.
That sounds fantastic.
The Maid is quite an intriguing novel. It tells the story of a maid in a big hotel, a grand hotel, who discovers a murder, actually a dead man in the hotel. And the plot unfolds starting from there. It's a thriller. It's a psychological thriller. It's a whodunit story, a classical story in that way, but also a very, very innovative way into the mind of a person who is kind of different. How is Molly different, and why is she so special? And also because the novel is written in the first person, and that's also intriguing, and it makes the reader feel closer to her. Actually, I have to say, I'm not spoiling anything, I think. I have to say that the first sentence is, "I am your maid."
Yes, and it was a very important sentence. It's really a declaration in a lot of ways. And I think you're absolutely right that Molly is a bit of an unusual character. You know, she's a socially awkward roommate, and, you know, she stumbles across the body of a guest who's very, very dead in his hotel room bed. And she very quickly becomes the lead suspect in the murder. And sometimes that's not because necessarily all the clues point at her, but because of a certain amount of prejudice that people have against her. Molly loves to clean. She takes her job very seriously. You know, she, works as a servant in a lot of ways in this hotel, but she actually has a lot of pride and dignity in her work. I try to portray that through the story. My goal is really for the reader to step behind the experience of Molly, to be somebody and to think like somebody who might lack social cues, who might not be able to see the world from a very usual perspective. And my hope is that if you follow Molly from the beginning to the end of her journey, that to live as her is to love her. Finally, it is a whodunit, as you say. It is a thriller in some ways, but it's also a novel about what it means to be the same as everyone else, and yet entirely different. And, I think this, in a lot of ways, I tried to write about a character who some people say, well, is she on the autism spectrum? Does she have a difference in her brain chemistry, which makes her the way she is? And I would say that that's a question I want the reader to focus less on. What I want you to focus on is being her. So if I had labeled Molly and said in my descriptive copy, oh, this is her, she is like this, she has this, I was really worried that people would see her as other. This isn't me, this is somebody else, this is somebody different from me, and miss the entire point of the book, which is that in our differences, we are all the same.
That's true. It's true and very poetic at the same time. I wonder what made you think of this, and what made you come up with this idea. Have you ever been fascinated with hotels?
Yes.
Or with cleaning?
I am. I could talk all day about both of those things. I'll first tell you a little bit about how I got this idea. I was in London in 2019. I was on a business trip and I was staying at a hotel. I stepped out to go to a meeting. I came back and I completely startled the roommate who was cleaning my room. And I remember her stepping back into a shadowy corner, and in her hands, this is the truly embarrassing part, Nadine, she had in her hands my track pants, which I had left in a tangled mess on my bed because I'd gone for a run that morning. And so in a sweaty pile, I'd just thrown them down on the bed. And that's what she was holding in her hands. And I just thought, what an intimate an invisible job it is to be a roommate. You know, she'd been cleaning my room day after day, and she knew so much about me, but I didn't know anything about her. So this is one of those little moments that it just happens and it strikes you, but you don't think about it a lot. It just sort of lodges in the back of your brain. And then, you know, a few days later, I was on my plane ride home, and that's when it really hit me. I could hear Molly's voice, and it came to me. It was clean, it was polished, it was precise. Didn't sound like me. And so I didn't have any paper, but I grabbed the napkin from under my drink on the plane, and I started to write the prologue for this, what turned out to be this book, The Maid, in a single burst. And that is really how the genesis of this novel began. It began on a napkin in a plane.
Did you ever meet some maid, or not that maid, after you wrote the book, just to have some feedback from?
I did. Yes, I did that. And I did a lot of investigating around hotels and kind of lurking in hotels as well. What I wanted to explore was this notion of invisibility.
Yeah.
You know, maids and workers in hotels are there and at your service, but they also have to have this art of invisibility at the same time. Now, that's very helpful for a mystery writer, for sure. But there is another aspect that is, you know, a hierarchy. And I think hotels are tricky that way, because that hierarchy is established for the benefit of the guest. You know, we walk into a grand, luxurious hotel, a beautiful 5-star, like the Regency Grand Hotel that I depict in the book. And, you know, it is wonderful. It's a wonderful illusion put on for the guest. But that illusion comes at the price of a lot of hard workers behind the scenes who are propping that image up, who are making it happen for us. And, you know, maids most certainly are doing that. We never see them clean. We're not supposed to see them doing the job. They must go in there invisibly and do the work, right?
I was wondering about what you said, that you can tell a lot when you walk into a room and you see the objects spread around, and even a room in a hotel, which was made up, can still tell a lot of things about the guest. And there was always, I think, in magazines, a test about women or men walking into the other sex's room and trying to figure out what that person is like, the hobbies, the profession, or whatever. So that's very interesting to picture now how Molly's room looks like. So have you have you thought about this when you were figuring her out as a character? What's her home like when she goes home? Who's cleaning her place? If she keeps something from the hotel, meaning, like, I don't know,
well, it's interesting because we do get to visit Molly's apartment. And, you know, Molly lives two lives. She lives the life of this glamour inside the Regency Grand Hotel, a world which she loves. She loves the elegance of that beautiful, beautiful hotel. But she lives another life because she is a maid. She's socially and economically highly disadvantaged. So her you know, living experience at home is entirely different. She lives in a very poor, shabby, rundown 2-bedroom apartment with her grandmother. However, at the beginning of the book, her grandmother has died. And that has left her really rootless in some essential ways, and struggling to try to navigate the world, because Gran really did understand Molly and helped her navigate social cues. And without her, she's a bit at a loss. Now, in their apartment, we get to see it very up close. It's shabby. You know, most of the things that they have are things that they would have found in the garbage, or they're rejects from other people, and they've made them their own. And Molly's room is very bare and spare and simple. But everything has its place, and there's a lot of joy and pride that comes with that. And of course, because Molly is Molly, everything there is spotlessly clean.
Actually, I thought while reading the book that was her grandmother's house, and she doesn't have a home of her own. And this was like a metaphor, because living in a hotel means having a house but not having a home. And that while she's working there, she kind of borrows the persona of the hotel around her, because as you say, she is invisible, but she also has to do her job. And maybe she fantasizes about living in a hotel herself. Have you ever lived in a hotel for a long time?
I have never lived in a hotel. I have never, but I do think what you're saying is really interesting and fascinating. I think, there's two ways to define home. Mm-hmm. And we can define home by space, or we can define home by social connection. And I think, so I think you're absolutely right that when we get to see Molly in the present tense in her home, which is no longer a home, it's just an apartment. The reason why it doesn't feel like home for her anymore is because Gran is gone. She's died. So home isn't home without her. And she actually says that a couple of times in the novel. And so, yes, the Regency Grand becomes a very important place for her because she's trying to rediscover that sense of home. But she has to go on this journey of discovery through the book to realize that home isn't a place. Home is people. Home is community. Home is connection and a sense of belonging.
Well, a hotel is also a community. A very close community, but at the same time, a very strict community, and also open, as you say, as an image, as an illusion to the guests. Now, we've talked about this, we've talked about her home. We haven't mentioned the murder, which is the most important part of the plot. I don't want to reveal too much because the novel is built on this atmosphere of her thoughts, of her inner persona, and how you actually become quite accustomed to her, and you're kind of fond of her because you don't know how to think of her. She's kind of like a pet or some sort of person that you don't know much about, but at the same time you would like to know her, you would like to feel for her. She's as I was saying, she's awkward. She's socially awkward, and also she's awkward to herself. Well, for such a person to encounter such a big thing, finding a dead body, that's quite scary, even for a writer to handle such a crime scene. Why do you think about this, about the murder? Why would she discover a murder and not, I don't know, a pink elephant in the room?
Well, I talked a little bit before about the gift of that lightning bolt inspiration of hearing Molly's voice. And that really drove me to write this novel, to hear that voice and then to know in that delivery of that gift from the gods, I also knew that sense of place. I knew that this novel was going to be set in a hotel. But then I think one of the questions that I had to be conscious about as a writer was, okay, I have a setting, I have a character with a strong voice, but what world, what genre are we stepping into? And that's where I started to be a little bit more conscious in my decision making. And, hotels are so fascinating because they are like bad people. They have two faces. They have the face of the facade, as I mentioned before, which is elegant and glamorous and luxurious and lovely. But there is also something that happens behind all those closed doors. And that's where the dirty secrets can lie. And so I wanted to explore that space more. And it seemed to me that upstairs, downstairs sensibility and that public space versus private, secrets versus visibility and invisibility, all of these were really rife territories that took me down the road to the path of a mystery. And I think, in something that really inspires me as a writer is to try to put genres together that maybe don't fit together very well and see if I can do it. And that was one of the challenges with this. I knew that I was in the world of a mystery, a whodunit, a very classical, as you say, tradition of an Agatha Christie style mystery. But on the other hand, I also have layered in what the Brits call uplifting literature, or what Americans call feel-good fiction. So these are the two genres that I'm sort of borrowing. And feel-good fiction, or uplit, is a journey characterized by a feeling of hope, where a character grows from the beginning to the end, and there's a sense of hope, happiness, joy, and a triumphant human spirit. Something happening that brings you love and light. And you sort of mentioned that about Molly. So my challenge was, can I really have a murder mystery and have a character journey that brings us happiness in the end? Happiness and murder mystery doesn't always go together. So that was part of my writerly challenge in navigating how to get from the beginning of this story to the end and achieve that in a cross genre.
So the message is that there is hope, there is redemption, that even an insignificant person, nobody is insignificant, but she's perceived as such, can actually have decency in the end and actually be happy and be recognized. Because I think what she suffers from is the fact that she's not seen, she's not acknowledged. And that's why her voice becomes stronger and stronger. And to the end, you get this feeling that she's growing to herself. And that's important. Now, the hotel in itself is a fascinating place because, as you say, there are bad people there, but there are bad people everywhere, meaning that if you live in a block of flats and behind the doors, there are your neighbors that you meet every day, but you have no idea who they are. They might be killers or whatever, psychos, or and as you say, the hotel is this very good space for juggling the private and the public. And she's somewhere in between because she's not a public figure herself, or she's not exposed in any way, but she's not private to anyone. She's just alone. And loneliness is one thing that I think describes very well her journey, and also the journey of a hotel in general. Have you thought about this, about the themes of the book, since you tried to combine two different genres in a very powerful way?
I think you're definitely right about loneliness. And the thing that makes her the most lonely is that she's in a state of grief. She's lost the one person in her life who actually truly understood her and helped her navigate the world in such important ways. And you're right, too, that she has to learn her own strengths. And so does the reader. I think at the beginning of the novel, we might judge her a little bit and think her foolish or naive or ridiculously innocent. But as we travel throughout the novel, we start to see that maybe she's a little bit smarter and a little bit stronger than we realized from the beginning. And I think, for me, something that really influenced me was being a special needs teacher. So a long time ago, when I was much younger, I worked with special needs students. And, it was one of those things where my job was to be the teacher, but in so many profound ways, I came out of that experience as a student. And, in the classroom, of course, all of our students would have labels and learning plans. We'd know so much about their background. And that was, of course, very, very important for us to individuate learning needs. But often we would go out into the world, into a social situation, go to a museum or on a field trip or to a restaurant. And I will never forget how casually cruel people could be, regular people who we would come in contact, who simply could not deal with their minor differences or their behavioral differences. And I never forgot that. It was really striking and powerful, and just made me hyper aware of the prejudice that somebody who is slightly different might face in the world. However, on the plus side, I got to see something else. I got to see these teenagers respond with so much human dignity, so much strength, so much personal power, because, by the time they were 16 years old, they had dealt with this for all their lives and they were ready for it. And it impressed me so much. And when I was writing this, I don't think I was conscious of it, but I think I gave those best qualities in some of my students to Molly.
That's true. Yeah. And it's endearing because she's actually based on a real character, but not on a real character, on the vulnerabilities of many real characters, and also on our vulnerabilities who don't have special needs or are not in that position. And yet we kind of recognize ourselves in some aspects of her personality. Now, you said that your previous experience was very helpful in writing this book, but also you've been an editor, and this also might have helped. And if yes, how? And my curiosity goes also towards the pile of manuscripts you've received with not similar plots, with similar whodunit stories. What were you thinking before you started writing this about the stories similar to this one that you were receiving? Has this shaped your appetite for this type of writing, for the genre?
Well, yeah, I mean, I've been an editor for almost 20 years. I continue to work as an editor.
Yeah.
And, you know, one thing that I always say is that I completely credit my writers, the writers that I've worked with over the years, hundreds of them by now, who have taught me the craft of writing. You know, by allowing me to participate in their world building, in solving their narrative problems, I have learned so much about everything that it takes to tell a good story. You know, and I think you're pointing to trends in literature, and certainly, you know, we'll see waves of things come and go. When you're in this business long enough, you do see that happening. And I think we're having a moment now, a sort of renaissance of literature from the past coming back, or archetypes from the past coming back. You know, that Agatha Christie style tribute to the classical mystery. There's something comfortable and so-called cozy about a return to that sort of world. And for me, marrying that, taking something old and traditional and you know, marrying that with something original and new, the sort of feel-good aspect to it, was really important, so that I could have something contemporary and something old at the same time and bring those two ideas together. It's different, though. Let me just say, being an editor versus being a writer, it's such a very different experience. I have always known that, you know, writing is a very vulnerable thing to do. It really makes you feel unsteady. But to experience that myself, it's actually quite mind-blowing, and I will never edit the same way again. I often talk about the labyrinth, and this is a metaphor I use to explain how an editor writes or works with a writer. So, you know, you have a writer and she's standing in front of a maze, in front of a labyrinth, and her job is to get from the beginning of the story through the maze to the end. But when you're that close up, and this is something I learned too, writing this novel, you can't see what's ahead. You know, you might turn down one narrative pathway that comes to a dead end and you don't know, but your editor is on a ladder outside. She's looking down and can say, don't go that way, because you'll come to a dead end. You want to do this instead. And there's a really lovely synergy that can happen between a really good editor and a writer, where you're working together towards the same goal and sharing the same idea of what the story could be. And wow, it was so interesting for me to be on the other side of that and have that author blindness, and to have to rely on my editors to say, not like this, like that. Don't go there, do this, you know?
Do you think you've become more indulgent or more lenient towards the writers presenting their manuscripts in front of you, now that you know how it feels to be on the other side and how it feels to have this passage rejected? Or I don't know, I wonder if you've ever told them, kill your darlings, and this is not
I have many times. Kill your darlings, indeed. So yeah, I think I've become more sensitive. You know, it's that big difference that we all experience in life between intellectually knowing something and feeling it.
Yeah.
I always knew that there was that feeling of vulnerability, of sensitivity around the creation of your world, of your narrative world. But to feel it makes a big difference. And, you know, I hope that in some way that I've delivered some of that on the page, that to feel being Molly makes you empathize with her, you know?
Which is quite rare, because she's quite an atypical person, and it's difficult to create a believable character like that. And also something which comes up very often in the debates I have with writers nowadays, because it's a topic which is mirroring the gist of the times, let's put it this way, is the unreliable narrator. And you don't know for sure if she's lying, if she's making it up, if she's delusional because she suffers from something, if she's projecting things, whatever, or if she's hiding things from herself, first of all, and then from the hotel and from us. So that's quite important to have mastered that, and well done. I'm
Thank you.
I'm that you wrote the book as you wrote it, and I'm asking you if you're working on something else. And
I am. So, I have a few things that I'm working on. I have 2 or 3 different ideas. I have a lot of readers who would love more Molly. And I have to say that, one of my goals with this book is to leave the reader wanting more. If I've done my job right, that's how the reader should feel at the end of the novel. But now I have boxed myself into a creative challenge because, of course, if I give the reader more Molly with my next book, I will only do so if I can do it at the same level. I want to give you more or the same and not give you less. Mm-hmm. So I'm trying to solve that creative problem right now. And hopefully in a couple of years, we'll see another book that might feature Molly in some way. And that's one of the possibilities. And if not, then I can say that, my hallmarks will always be the same. Whatever I write next, whatever I commit to as the next book will be distinctly me. I like to, deal with characters who might be a little bit off center, maybe because I am, to be honest, Nadine.
We all are.
In our ways, right? Once you get to know people, you realize that everybody is a little bit different in their own way.
Yes, embracing our own differences is the first step. So that's why this kind of writing and this kind of literature puts you at ease, because you understand and you accept the awkwardness of the others, which is always in our eyes, but we never see ourselves. So that's
very true.
Yeah, and it's good to know that she can become a Miss Marple, and she can solve mysteries for decades from now on, because who knows? Yeah, maybe she evolves into somebody else, and maybe she becomes the manager of the hotel. Why not?
Why not? She can do anything.
Exactly. That's a good point. So I think the message of the book, if there's one, well, not all books have to have a message. Maybe they have just a feeling that the reader should or can take away. What would that be from The Maid?
I think the feeling of we all need to each other. We all need to grow and change and to accept our differences, because it's those differences that make the world a much richer and more dynamic place. And the more we can empathize with others, the better our lives will be.
Are you writing the next book in the first person as well?
Definitely.
Oh, okay. So you found like that. There are writers who prefer to write in the first person and they can never write anything else or anything different, and others who have to maintain that distance from the characters or from the narrative thread, because they think that otherwise their objectivity gets compromised. And I don't know, it's it's
there's such different kinds of books and styles, and I've worked in the short story realm doing third person fiction, very close third person, I must admit, but for this sort of book and for the goal of this book, first person is absolutely necessary, because it's experiential. I have to have the reader experiencing life as this character. So for me, that is a wonderful place to set myself. And I can't say that I will always write in first person, but certainly for my next 2 books, they'll be first person.
That's great that you know in advance, meaning that you're very focused on what you're writing. So we can expect good books following in the next years.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. now that we're reaching the end of the interview, unfortunately, but I hope you'll be our guest sometime soon in the future with your next book, and maybe in person in Bucharest if you want to come to.
I would love to come to Bucharest. Absolutely. I would love to meet my readers there. And I just want to thank you so much for this opportunity and for the wonderful questions. It's just lovely having such a nice open conversation.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate it. And I appreciate our conversation. And I like the book, obviously. So I mentioned in Romanian at the beginning of the interview that this is an interview for the Litera Anniversary days. Therefore, that's why we're even happier to have you part of this festival. And maybe one day, maybe next year, you can come in person as well.
I would love that. And many congratulations on your 33rd year. What a hallmark landmark.
Thank you so much. We're going to blow the candles and hope that there are going to be many more in the future, and with many, many books, because it's the books that make the cake, let's say so. And now I'm just going to ask one last question, unfortunately, but we'll see each other again, I hope. If you have a message for your Romanian readers, and if you would like to for them to read the book in a certain way, or search for some clues, or maybe you can give them a hint.
To my Romanian readers, I would just like to say thank you. Thank you for giving this book a try, for going on this journey of living behind Molly's eyes and experiencing life as she does. This is a book that's about a journey. It's about an experience of being somebody else for a little bit, for a little while. And I really, really hope to enjoy it. And moreover, I hope that you'll reach out to me, or that somehow, maybe next year, we'll meet in person and we can talk further about books and writing and reading.
Yes, definitely. And also I'm thinking about the moment when you come to in a hotel and don't know what surprises you might get there, meaning the interaction with the maid who might have read your book. And I said it's the last question and I lied, and I have to because it just came to my mind that I have to ask you about your name, your pen name, so because it's quite good and quite unusual, and Prose.
Yes, Prose. So that is not my real last name. My real last name is Pronovo. However, because I'm an editor, it just, whenever I'm at work, people developed a shorthand for my very long last name. So, my colleagues would say, hey, Prose, will you look at this copy? Hey, Prose, does this read well to you? Hey, Prose, have you read that new acquisition? Have you read that new book? And so this became my nickname at work. And then it became my Twitter handle. And then when it was time to, decide what my pen name would be, because my last name is impossible to spell and far too long to fit on a book cover, it seemed like the natural name to make me Nita Prose, because I've been called this for quite some time.
No, but it's nice because it sounds like Nita Prose. It's like the prose is neat, and therefore it's even better. And Prose is always a good name for a writer, unless the writer is a poet, but that's another story.
I hope I live up to it. I try.
Yes, you definitely do that. Thank you so much, Nita, and best of luck, and see you soon, I hope.
Thank you so much, Nadine, and thank you, Litera.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye.